Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you all very much for coming. So this is the first Queensland-based Bridge Program Occasional Seminar Series, and we're very honoured today to have Professor Marie Smith to give this occasional series lecture. So her topic, I think we've got a title up there, so it's University Commercialisation Approaches and How This Can Translate Research. And this is extremely relevant to the Bridge Program. So I don't know if everyone's aware of the Bridge Program, but we have over 100 participants in the Bridge Program across Australia. Bridge Program is sponsored by MTP Connect and involves a consortia of 14 pharmaceutical companies, as well as venture capitalists, as well as regulators in the area. And we've come together to work together to look at how to train entrepreneurs and how to endeavour and allow people to undertake commercialisation in Australia. I think, as we're all aware, there is this gap between the research that's happening and the outcomes in terms of the products that happens in Australia. And so we really need to try and bridge that gap. That's why we called it the Bridge Program. I know I'm not speaking the best at the moment, but I just flew in from Canada this morning and my mouth is just not keeping up with what I wanted to do. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best here, okay? But as I said, this is the first of our occasional seminars, and we have a number of these happening across Australia because we have candidates right across Australia. So they're in all states. The first one was occurred at Macquarie University in Sydney. This is the first one in Queensland. And I think it's a real honour to have Marie here, and I want to tell you a little bit about her, but it's an honour because I've known her for a long time, and I'd like to say that she's a good friend, a great collaborator, but also a great researcher. So she's currently the Director of the Centre for Integrated Preclinical Drug Development at UQ Centre for Clinical Research, Faculty of Medicine at the University of Queensland. Internationally, she's a leading researcher in biomedical discovery, with translation being a particular expertise in the novel pain therapeutics area. She's an inventor on several patented novel analgesics technologies, with one licensed to the UQ spin-out company Spinifex Pharmaceuticals. And this was for commercialisation in mid-2005, and it was later acquired by Novartis in mid-2015. So she certainly has taken things all the way through from the research side right through to the translation side. She has expertise also in pharmacokinetic studies, deriving pharmacokinetic parameters from plasma drug concentration versus time data from animal and also early phase human clinical trials, as well as expertise in clinical trial conducting. In the last 2 years, she's received lots of awards, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce them all properly, but I'll do my best. There was one in 2016, the Bowl of Hygeia Award, from the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia. The 2016 ATSI, Clooney's Ross Knowledge Commercialisation Award. The 2015 Johnson & Johnson Innovation Oz Biotech Industry Excellent Award in the field of Outstanding Leader. And also the 2015 Life Sciences Queensland Hall of Fame inaugural inductee. So let's all welcome Professor Marie Smith.
Thank you, Lynn, for your very kind words, and thank you to you and your team for this invitation. So I hope that I do a good job. First thing is I need to use this properly. So I point it here. Okay. Ah, there it is. So I told you I had two right thumbs when it comes to using devices. So in this presentation, I'm just going to speak on these themes. Why commercialise? What are the commercialisation models? Navigation of commercialisation models by university-based researchers, initiatives that have been established in recent times to foster commercialisation. I'll talk a little bit about Spinifex, the journey of Spinifex in a brief case study, and I'll finish up talking about how we measure researchers and what I think needs to happen in that regard. So just to reinforce what Lynn said, in Australia we are very, very good at biomedical research on the academic side. And this is attested to by the fact that 10 Nobel laureates almost 3% of publications are in the top 1% of cited journal articles internationally. But as Lynn said, the successful translation of this outstanding research into products is something that's not commensurate, and so it's an area in which we must improve. So the OECD is everything. Yep, thumbs up. Okay. So if we look at how much Australia spends on R&D relative to the OECD, relative to the USA, you know, it's not that much different in terms of amounts spent per head of population. We're not too different from the OECD average, and America's only a little bit higher than us. If we have a look, however, at the number of patents per head of population, here's the OECD average, and here's Australia way down here. So we've got outstanding biomedical research, outstanding number and quality of publications, but the number of patents is much, much lower than what you'd expect. And here's the USA up here, and look how well Japan and Finland are doing compared to us. If we have a look at the number of researchers per head of population doing research and development, here we have Australia right next to the USA, very similar numbers, normalised, but look what's different. The bulk of them, the majority in the US are in companies, and the smaller proportion is in universities, whereas in Australia it's the opposite. So we just don't have the business power, if you like. We just don't have the large number of researchers in the industry side. So if we've got the great research, we're not doing so well in patents, and we don't have the entrepreneurial skills to the level that we would like to have them. So I've thought about this and put together this cartoon. So basically, the way I look at it is we've got a Ferrari discovery engine, and unfortunately the rest of it, which is to translate all that energy into products for improving human health, is still stuck back in the Model T Ford days. And so this is what we need to do better, and the program that you've initiated in building skills is part of the answer for that. So when we talk about translation, there's two sort of conversations going on. When I talk to some of my colleagues when they're talking about translation, what they're really talking about is improving policy and practice at the clinical interface. The sort of translation that this talks about is the commercialisation to new therapeutic products for improving human health. So the rest of the talk is focused on this. It's very confusing when I hear people talking about, you know, translation, and I know they're not doing therapeutic products. So we need a different word. So we've got translation used in two different contexts. We need different words. So why do we want to commercialise IP? So basically, if you want to change people's lives for the better, it's my strongly held belief that you don't have a choice but to go down the commercialisation path if you wish to address large unmet medical needs. This in turn translates into revenue and jobs and opportunities for the young people, for the next generation of researchers within our own country. And in terms of prerequisites for doing this type of commercialisation, translation to products, you need to have your IP patent protected. I see one of our patent attorney friends in the audience. And because without that, you're not going to be able to attract commercialisation partners. And also the researchers who want to embark on this need to have the right mindset. Just know you're on a long journey. And 15 years is pretty much the average. So it's not for the faint-hearted. The quick fix is rush out into a quick publication. If you go down the commercialisation track, you need to be very patient. So putting together the commercialisation models that we have access to here in Australia in the last 2 decades. Spin-out companies could be the IP is directly out-licensed at an early stage to a pharma or a larger biotech. Could be a collaboration with pharma, such as the collaborations that happen with J&J, or could be philanthropically funded to a certain level, and all of these can potentially interact with each other. So as a researcher in the university, how do we navigate which is the best path to take? Well, this is where our technology transfer offices come in. So here's us over here, and we generally don't have the expertise, know-how, experience or networks to do the IP commercialisation ourselves, because we're not connected to the people who you need to work with to help with this. So at UQ we have UniQuest, you guys have here at QUT have Blue Box, and we're relying on their networks with these different types of people whose expertise will be needed to do the commercialisation properly. So the sort of program that you've put together, Lynn and your team, is basically upskilling the researchers to be more confident in terms of interacting with patent attorneys, doing pitches to venture capital firms, doing pitches to big pharma, etc. In my experience, the commercialisation model or pathway favoured by the tech transfer officers is highly influenced by their KPIs. So if their KPIs is to do spin-out companies, that's what happens. If their KPIs is to do licensing deals, that's what happens. So universities have to be very thoughtful in terms of what KPIs they give to their tech transfer officers. So getting from the health and biomedical discoveries from university researchers such as ourselves to the point of products is a very long and difficult journey, and it's usually referred to as crossing the valley of death. And I like this Hagar the Horrible cartoon because it really encapsulates just how difficult it is. And in fact, there are multiple valleys of death, not just one. So if you fall off once and manage to get back on, you're likely to fall off again a little bit later. So it's very, very challenging. So you putting a bridge for the bridge program across the valley of death is very insightful. So what I've seen in the last couple of years, and you'd all be probably aware of this, is the government is well aware of the fact that there's this Ferrari engine of R&D discovery, and we need initiatives to modernise the drivetrain so that the whole discovery translation pipeline is all streamlined and Ferrari-like in design. So in 2013 we had the R&D tax credits, the Medical Research Future Fund came along about 2015, Biomedical Translation Fund, now there's money flowing from that, and then there's the MPT Connect programs, the Industry Growth Centre, which is upskilling our researchers. So here's a bit more detail, 43.5 cents in the dollar for companies with market cap less than 20 mil. Well, this is going to incentivise the tech transfer officers to create spin-out companies, because pretty much for every dollar you spend, you're getting $2 worth of bang for your buck, if you like, because you're getting almost half back for every dollar spent, and it's received in the year of the expenditure, not some future time when you have revenue. The Medical Research Future Fund, ultimately, when it's fully capitalised, will have $20 billion for investment in health and medical research. And at that time, after full capitalisation, about $1 billion a year to invest. And the MRFF has 6 different platforms that they'll invest in, one of which is commercialisation, with that being targeted to the Valley of Death. And it's working hand in hand with the Biomedical Translation Fund, 500 million in all. The 3 private fund managers that have been selected, they have money now to invest. And I can tell from our centre, the Centre for Integrated Preclinical Drug Development, where we have GLP accreditation and we do studies with small biotech, help small biotech companies, there is definitely more money flowing in the sector just based on that activity alone. The number of times we get asked to give quotations for them has gone up quite dramatically since this funding has started to flow. And then the MPT Connect program, which I think is absolutely brilliant in terms of its goals of fostering development of commercialisation skills and business acumen, with the longer term or medium term goal of having better deal flow, more high quality deal flow in the sector. So I mentioned that the MRFF has got 6 platforms that it's investing its money in, one of which is commercialisation. And so in terms of that aspect, they are going to invest in these 2 areas here, where the 2 valleys of death are. So getting the first step out of the discovery lab to the so-called proof of principle in perhaps an animal model of the disease. Getting that sort of money, $100,000 usually, $50,000 to $100,000 is very difficult. And so they're going to invest in that area. And then they're also going to invest in the back end of preclinical, where you want you want a full IND enabling tox program. So you can then go into early phase clinical trials. So they're going to invest in these 2 so-called valleys of death here. And then these may be after a startup has been initiated, or a startup might happen after that. But in terms of where they're targeting their money, this is where it is, to try and overcome the hurdles in the Valley of Death. Also, the MRFF is investing in the whole pipeline to make sure there is ongoing IP. So effectively doubling the amount of money when it once fully capitalised in the health research area. So the Biomedical Translation Fund, 3 private sector fund managers at the moment. There's One Ventures is on a road trip around Australia saying, come out and tell us your pitches, come and give your pitches. And so there'll be one of those in Brisbane. I think might even be tomorrow. So they're looking for the next generation of companies to invest in. So there's an enormous number of recent government initiatives, including the Advanced Queensland program, which is $470 million in total. And there are these initiatives. So the idea is to try and get the smaller end of the scale, SMEs, small to medium enterprises, working towards commercialisation goals, often in collaboration with universities. So basically the money goes to the company, and the company may, as one of the KPIs, need to have a collaboration with university-based researchers. So the Hot Desk Business Development Fund, Ignite Ideas, and on it goes. Knowledge Transfer Partnerships, the precinct down there in Fortitude Valley, which is an innovation hub, and that's where One Ventures has their home. Young Starters Fund, all sorts of initiatives. Innovate Queensland, Testing with Government, or TWIG, and the Small Business Innovation Research, which is aimed at solving 4 of the so-called grand challenges that the government has put out. So if you look, so we've got the federal government, we've got Queensland government, and then we've got non-government initiatives as well. So Tamlin's here representing the Johnson & Johnson Innovation Partnering Office here in this building, and I'll tell you a little bit about each one of these, which are all very, very new, aimed at fostering this discovery translation to a commercialisation outcome. So Johnson & Johnson been going about a year, the Innovation Partnering Office, and the most important part is giving academics and other entrepreneurs access to this wealth of knowledge and expertise to make sure you don't fall in all the potholes that everyone else has fallen in years past. So avoiding the potholes by tapping into this international repository of outstanding information. And if they like what you're doing, well, then they might basically invest in your company, which would be just terrific. QUEDI, this is an initiative between the University of Queensland and Emory University, and it's about drug discovery. So at the University of Queensland, I'm sure that QUT is probably no different. It's drug target rich, so biology rich. Lots of novel targets, but molecule poor. So there's lots of novel targets, but not the small molecules that modulate those targets. And so the QUEDI initiative is about doing the chemistry, the medicinal chemistry, to make molecules that are going to be drug-like for potentially pushing further down the pipeline into out-licensing and commercialisation. So this chemistry initiative is agnostic to disease area. It's all about finding hits to leads to drug candidates in the small molecule arena. And from memory, I think they've got about $16 million worth of runway, so they'll be going for quite some time. iLabs is located on the St Lucia campus of UQ and the Long Pocket campuses, and it's all about skills development also. So just like your bridge program, this is about skills development with a very small amount of seed funding available for these very small businesses started by the entrepreneurs. BioCurate, you may not have heard of this one. It's pretty brand new. It's a joint venture between the University of Melbourne and Monash. They've got $80 million, and they are going to invest in these to take the very early discoveries through that first valley of death, as well as further investment to take them down the drug development pipeline and into early commercialisation. So you might have seen Glenn Begley has been appointed as the CEO, and he's written a very highly cited article in Nature a couple of years ago, decrying the fact that pharma, where he came from, Amgen, could not reproduce the bulk of academic research that they had in-licensed. So that's going to be one of his pets, making sure that they're investing in high-quality, reproducible discoveries. And so this new initiative is being called an independent venture catalyst as opposed to capitalist. And so again, there'll be upskilling of researchers and injecting commercialisation, business acumen and funding, working closely with the academic researchers for successful commercialisation. And this is the M2 precinct. This is another new initiative. It's a joint project of CSIRO, Monash and the Monash Translational Health Precinct, and its focus is on med tech. So they have announced themselves as a one-stop shop to foster turning innovative ideas into med tech products as opposed to pharmaceuticals. So that's again right up your alley because your next program is on med tech. So that'll be perfect timing. So what you can see, what I've presented is there is a range of government, at federal government, at state government and non-government initiatives, all fostering entrepreneurship, development of business acumen and skills, and also injecting money into fostering discovery translation to therapeutic products for improving human health. So in other words, what we need to do is to get that Ferrari engine hooked up to the Ferrari drivetrain to make sure that we have better translation into products for improving human health. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about crossing the valley of death from my own personal experience, which was a brief case study on the Spinifex technology. So what's the name of the drug candidate? Well, it's called EMA 401, and it's a first-in-class novel pain therapeutic targeting neuropathic pain and chronic inflammatory pain. So why bother? Well, chronic pain is a very large unmet medical need. It's described by the International Association for the Study of Pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, and described in those terms by the patients. The pain is classified in several different ways, which makes it a little bit confusing for people. So we talk about acute and chronic pain, so being classified according to duration. So chronic pain is very prevalent. So if we take the whole of the adult population, at any one time, point prevalence is 1 in 5 adults. But if you get to 65 and older, it rises to 1 in 3 adults, so very high prevalence. It can be classified according to type, and there's three main types, so-called nociceptive, inflammatory, and neuropathic. So nociceptive is the sort of pain you get after you have an operation. You might wake up in pain. If the doctor's done a good job, you won't wake up in pain. If the anaesthetist is giving you strong opioid analgesics, hopefully you won't wake up in pain. But it gets better by itself. So you fall over, skin your knee, it hurts like hell, but then it resolves and gets better by itself. Inflammatory pain, there's a number of inflammatory pain. So osteoarthritis, for example, is a chronic inflammatory pain, quite difficult to alleviate. And neuropathic pain is nerve damage pain. So a particularly intractable form of nerve damage pain is the pain that persists after you've had the shingles. So initial shingles pain is bad enough, but then after the last shingles lesion has healed, the pain that persists for 12 weeks or longer beyond that is intractable neuropathic pain. And we also can classify pain according to intensity, so mild, moderate and severe. So the currently available analgesics aren't that great and for chronic pain, and that's why there's a large unmet medical need. So the World Health Organization put out this 3-step analgesic ladder back in 1986, and it was just trying to improve cancer pain relief. And so the first step is for mild pain, the second step is for when mild pain becomes moderate pain, and the top step is for severe pain. So down on the bottom step, we have non-opioid analgesics. So this is like ibuprofen and paracetamol, plus or minus adjuvant therapy. So what is adjuvant therapy? If there's a nerve damage component, a neuropathic component, well, anticonvulsants or antidepressants are used as adjuvant therapy because they're the drugs recommended for treatment of neuropathic pain. So we don't have any novel pain therapeutics that have been discovered just to treat neuropathic pain to date. So that's why EMA 401 has got people a little bit excited. So on the second step, we have weak opioids added in. So that would be like Panadine Forte. So you have a combination of codeine and Panadine, and paracetamol. And if there's a neuropathic component, you keep the adjuvant drugs going. And then for severe pain, it's the strong opioids. So if you've had a major abdominal operation, you'll be given strong opioid analgesics with probably paracetamol, because paracetamol has a opioid sparing effect. So if you keep the paracetamol in there, the amount of strong opioid needed is less, and therefore you're going to have less constipation, which is a main side effect of strong opioid analgesics. And always keep the adjuvant therapy going if there's a neuropathic component. So these novel the existing analgesics all have adverse event profiles which are not very pleasant, and that's why there's a large unmet medical need. So in the past 25 years in my field, there's been a huge global effort on the neurobiology side, trying to identify novel targets for drug discovery. And we've been very good at that. There's more than 100 targets. And in fact, if you have a look in the genes database, the pain genes database, there's about 350 genes have been implicated in chronic pain. And so where are these targets? Well, they're on nerve terminals, peripheral immune cells, neurons and non-neuronal cells in the central nervous system, as well as in the dorsal root ganglia. So this is basically a cartoon of what happens if there is peripheral nerve damage. So here's the peripheral nerve damage, and what happens is it sets up ectopic firing on the primary afferents into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. So that's just a constant chat going into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. And what that does is cause neuroplastic changes both in the spinal cord and in the brain, and basically there's a pathway which I haven't shown on here, which is normally silent, which at the level of the brain is switching on, and it becomes like a dog chasing its tail. So the chronic pain is just feeding on itself. So we've had 25 years of drug discovery, 350 genes implicated in chronic pain. So where are all the novel analgesics? Well, unfortunately, in our field, lots of promising data from neuropathic pain models in rodents, but it hasn't translated into the clinic. And so I've got a whole other talk on why that is, which we won't go into today. But I can summarise the reasons that the clinical trials have failed is for 3 reasons in common with other therapeutic areas. So toxicity and poor tolerability, poor pharmaceutical properties, so they're just not stable enough to have a decent shelf life, and also unsuitable pharmacokinetics. So in other words, what the body does to the molecule means it can't be given once or twice a day, or it's not well absorbed after oral administration. But the main one, more than 50% of novel pain therapeutics that go to clinical trials fail due to lack of efficacy. And so we've got very poor preclinical to clinical translation. Yeah.
I'm just going to remove that from this last book.
Yes. Oh, yeah, sure.
This one's good.
So basically, in terms of this part here, so EMA 401 has successfully translated, but in the field there are 2 main schools of thought. One of them is you need to get the novel drugs into the central nervous system because all those neuroplastic changes have happened, and the other is keep the drugs out of the central nervous system and just shut off this ectopic firing, and then you may allow that neuroplastic changes to spontaneously reverse. So EMA 401 was testing that latter hypothesis because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier at all. And so in 2014, this paper appeared in The Lancet, and basically it was given to 183 patients with post-herpetic neuralgia, that type of neuropathic pain that is regarded as intractable, and about half the patients got the active treatment, the other half got placebo, randomised, double-blind, placebo-controlled. All the statistical analysis was done blinded, and then one day the phone rang, and just 2 words were on the phone, it worked. And so I was beside myself with, I was so happy that I had tears. And this is what the capsules, that's the actual what the capsules look like. So you couldn't tell the difference between the placebo and the active, and they had identical bottles, just treatment A and treatment B. So what is it? So basically what it is, it's a molecule that blocks the function of this receptor
called the angiotensin 2 type 2 receptor, which nobody knew what that receptor did, but everybody knows what the angiotensin 2 type 1 receptor does. It modulates blood pressure. So there are lots of medications that have been developed which block the AT1 receptor to lower high blood pressure, but nobody knew what the AT2 receptor did, and so it's a completely novel mechanism of action. And I'm just going to skip over a few of these and just get to the main point. So in terms of being not for the faint-hearted, this whole timeline we're talking about takes about 15 years. And so mapping this onto what happened with the EMA 401, so what happened was UniQuest were wanting to flush a few ideas out of the researchers at UQ, and so they created this competition called the Trailblazer Challenge, and I thought you had to have data, but you didn't. You only had to have an idea. So one of them knocked on my door and said, "Haven't you got something you can put in?" I said, I haven't got anything with data. I said, "That's all right, you only have to put in an idea." So I put this idea in, and they gave out 3 prizes, each was $8,000. And so I think there were about 15 different entries. So I had a 1 in 5 chance of getting one of the $8,000 prizes, so I got one. And I gave it to my chemistry colleague to make a molecule that was known as a tool compound in cardiovascular research. So it was being used as a tool compound, an angiotensin 2 type 2 receptor antagonist called PD123319. I remember that off by heart. And so it took him about a year. It was available from Sigma, but it was too expensive. I only had $8,000. And couldn't get enough to give to rats for $8,000. So it took him about a year, but he came up with the molecule. And so this is about a year after here, one day, so we were all very excited that, it was going to be tested in rats, and rat model of neuropathic pain, and, it was not sure what the results were going to be. Anyway, one of the staff knocked on the door and just said it worked. So that was a bit of a eureka moment there. And so UniQuest said, well, we need to get a provisional patent. So this is in the days when, you could raise a lot of money quite easily. So provisional patent was filed in the first half of 2005, and once that was done, then I was asked to give presentations. I didn't know the word pitch back then, but I was asked to give presentations to venture capitalists because they're trying to raise money to actually commercialise this intellectual property. So it took a few months, and my presentation got more polished as time went on. And UniQuest raised $3.25 million. So in the middle of 2005, Spinifex Pharmaceuticals was born. And so we had to do patent enablement. So once the provisional patent is filed, we needed to get a whole bunch of these molecules synthesised by a commercial company so that we could make sure that we didn't have an a non-AT2 receptor effect from the PD1319. So there were, from the 1990s, there were patents. What's wrong? So there were patents where the AT2 receptor antagonists had been proposed for various health-related things, but nothing to do with pain whatsoever, and they'd been allowed to lapse because they weren't progressed with. So there was all these molecules sitting in patents that we could just hoover up for our indication. And so 7 molecules were chosen, they were synthesised and all tested to make sure that they all worked in neuropathic pain, and they did. Then we had to do the pharmacokinetics and drug metabolism and also the mechanism of action, do research on that. And so the clinical, out of all of that, the clinical candidate was chosen, and gave the name EMA 401. People have asked me, what does EMA stand for? Well, the AT2 receptor, angiotensin II type 2 receptor, if you read papers about it, it was regarded as enigmatic. So EN on the front, A on the back, EMA. So that's because some people thought I named it after my daughter, which I didn't. And so an IND enabling toxin safety pharmacology program was done, and multiple phase 1 trials were done. So it wasn't just done in phase 1, which is safety and pharmacokinetics, wasn't just done in healthy young people, because the age of the population who would likely be the target are older. So older patients, older subjects I should say, healthy, had to also be recruited to do phase 1 to make sure it was safe in older individuals as well. So at the World Congress on Pain in August 2012, I'd been phoned up about 2 weeks before to, it worked on the phone. And so I was at this conference where they put out the press release that the trial had worked. So that was very exciting. And then about 2.5 years later, Professor Profeen Anand, who's from Imperial College London, he's a world famous neurologist, he did another trial in patients with cancer chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, and it worked in that as well. And Spinifex Pharmaceuticals went to America and I think it was 2014, and raised a whole bunch of cash, about 45 million, and they were just about to do phase 2B trials in the middle of 2015 when Novartis made them an offer too good to refuse, and so it was sold. Now Novartis have phase 2B trial in post-herpetic neuralgia underway. That started in June this year. So it's been hard to wait from the middle of 2005 to the middle of 2017 for them to get started, but they're a giant company. They're like the government, they're very bureaucratic. Wheels move slowly, but at least they're moving. So my very last point on this talk is just reflecting on how research performance is measured in an academic setting. So still, we're measured by publications, research grants, and how many PhD students we get to completion. And this is not counted: industry collaboration, IP commercialisation. So to my way of thinking, we've got all these brilliant initiatives from government and non-government, which are all having money pumped into them as we speak. We have these programs like the Bridge program, upskilling researchers to think in the right way, but we also need to change how people are measured if we want to get the best return on investment on all of the strategies which are currently underway. So thank you. So I'm the eternal optimist. I do think we can do it, but how people are measured definitely influences how they behave. So I think we need to definitely get the KPIs for academics changed. So this is my research team here. Whoops. And the photographer, when they came, just asked everybody to be a little bit silly. And so we got a nice natural looking photo. So thank you very much. So any questions?
Yeah, so sorry about the sound system. Is it going okay now?
I think it's okay now, but
Okay.
we might use the mic for questions.
Okay, so we're happy to take any questions from anyone out there, but I might just start off with a really kind of trivial type one. The big thing in the papers at the moment is codeine.
Yeah.
So does this EMA with the catchy title,
EMA 401,
yes,
yeah.
Does this play into that space, and is it likely to have any impact in that area?
Okay, so codeine is used for nociceptive pain. It doesn't work for neuropathic pain. So whereas EMA 401 doesn't work for nociceptive pain, it works for the chronic pains. So we're so no, they're not in the same space. Yeah.
You have any thoughts?
On codeine, yeah.
Does that really need something else?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely need something better. We need there is a whole stream of research going on aimed at developing novel opioid analgesics that are targeting just the G protein coupled pathway as opposed to the beta-arrestin pathway, based on a hypothesis that you can get a wider therapeutic index by having more specialised. So basically, the opioid receptors are G protein coupled, so they can signal through the G protein pathway and also through the beta-arrestin pathway. So the hypothesis that's driving a lot of research in the opioid field after donkey's years of hardly anything is to get molecules that just signal via the G protein coupled pathways and not signalling via the beta-arrestin pathways, with a view to opening up the therapeutic index and not having the plethora of side effect profiles, including, addiction potential. But that's very much still hypothetical and not really proven at this point. But there's a lot of investment in that area. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Maria. It's a fantastic story, and congratulations on a wonderful experience there. And I just wondered if you could reflect. Looking back on that, and it was interesting to see the various steps.
Yeah.
And so that was starting, 13 years ago. And so would you have the same? What would be different if you were, doing it from today?
Sure. Well, we wouldn't have a global financial crisis for a start. So it was easy to raise $3.25 million. They managed to raise $21 million in Australia, but couldn't raise any more money after that. But once the CEO went to the US, raised another $45 million in 3 weeks. So there was money flowing in the States, but not in Australia. The other things that would do differently would be, I guess, to send the CEO to the States a lot earlier. And so I think with the venture funds that we've got now, the MRCF, I get my acronyms mixed up, and people like that, they have got relationships now with venture funds in the US, so getting them to sort of co-invest it. Because a lot of time did get wasted trying to raise money in Australia when it probably should have gone straight to the US. Yep. In terms of the steps along the way, well, all the steps were necessary that I'm showing up there. They all were necessary. I guess there would have been times where there were a few gaps between this bit finishing and this bit starting, but it was all related to money. Yeah.
I had a follow-up question, if I may. And I mean, we always hear about hanging on as long as possible, and obviously you have hung on a long time. And ultimately, is it essential to have that bigger partner such as Novartis, or that final transition? You can't take it all the way with Spinifex.
So phase 2B is like a mini phase 3. So phase 2B is dose range finding. So in the phase 2A studies, the two that have been done, the dose was 100 milligrams twice a day. Is that the best dose to take to a phase 3? Well, you've got to ask that question by having 3 doses. So if you have a look on clinicaltrials.gov website, where all the trials have to be registered, it says that they're recruiting right now, and it's dose A, B and C, not saying what A, B and C is versus placebo. And so from that data, they will pick a dose to take forward to phase 3. Yeah. So it's meant to take about a year all up the trial. Yeah. So one thing you might want to think about is when to patent. So big pharmas don't patent until they've got phase 2A data, because they just keep it all as a trade secret. Whereas in university-based research being commercialised, it has to be patented, otherwise you're not going to attract commercialisation capital. So we have to think about file the patent, provisional, then send your paper off to the journal. But if you can sit on yourself for 18 months until the provisional gets published, well then, you know, you're basically giving the commercialisation a bit of a head start, rather, because once the patent's published, people who read patents will see it there. But if you rush straight in and publish, they'll get that information even earlier. So sitting on yourself for 18 months is hard if you think there's someone else going to pip you to the post on the publication side. Yeah. Yep.
I think you're right as well, because you're looking at academic performance. Publications is a big thing, and you don't get the grants without the publications.
Exactly.
So sitting for 18 months when, you have competitors,
it's
that's
hard.
tricky.
Yeah, so when people ask me about that, I say the good idea is to be researching on more than one thing, say on two things. So you're publishing in one while you hold back on the other until you've got your IP nice and secure, and then it will be published, so then you can publish a paper. So if you're only working on one thing, you'll basically execute yourself because you haven't got papers, therefore you won't get your grant.
Yeah, so develop a strategic and sneaky mind.
Yeah,
Yes.
Develop a strategic and sneaky mind, yes.
Okay, do we have any other questions out there?
Marie, I just wondered if you had any comments on the particular vehicle. Obviously for SpinFX, the spin-out company really worked. You were able to raise money and take it far down the line and get a good outcome. How do you go about making that decision early on? Is it how committed the people are to the project long term, or?
So why did it go spin out?
Yeah, or generally, why would you choose spin-out versus trying to license early?
If you have a choice, I think doing, like, partnering with J&J or another company like that would be really good, because you've got access to all that expertise. So you might have a spin out, but partnering early on, if you can get that relationship, I think that would be great, because that would probably speed up a lot of things and avoid a few of the potholes along the way. But the reason why spin out was done was because at that time, that was UniQuest's KPIs and there was money. So in the middle of 2005, it wasn't difficult to get $3.25 million. Yep. So, but after the GFC, very difficult to do a spin out. Yep.
I think you're right. I think the KPIs are a big thing here, but I think the push at the moment that I'm seeing is for spin-outs, which has changed, so it's sort of come full circle back to that area.
Yeah.
And there does seem to be more money around.
There is money, I can tell you.
So
for
theoretically,
sure
we're hoping there's no more financial crises likely to jump on top of us, the guarantees.
Yep.
Then it's probably the time to be doing that sort of thing, isn't it?
I agree. So in our centre, because we work a lot with small biotechs by doing collaborative R&D on discovery translation, we've definitely got more conversations going on because they can access money, because the Biotechnology Translation Fund has given its money out, and so they've got to invest in things. So it's a good time. If you've got some intellectual property, it's a good time to do a spin out. Yep. Yep.
Thanks, Marie. Aside from funding, were there any other great limitations or conflicts that you faced during your time?
Were there any, what?
Oh, any other great limitations or conflicts you came across?
Well, I think that it's... I'm really struggling at the moment to think of any other limitations. Well, you have to, I think one of the things you have to recognise in terms of limitations is your own personal limitations. So you have to work with all of these other professions. So Declan's here from FAK, right? Got the right company? And so you're working closely with patent attorneys so the best patent specification can be written. You can't just throw it at them and say, you do it. So, but you soon learn your limitations because,
you get to see what they do in that regard. It's completely different to writing a paper, writing a patent specification. So needing to sort of cover things that you might not have uncovered scientifically just yet. It might still be something that you think will be part of the story, and you've got to try and weave that in without really having the data. Because once you file the provisional, you've got a whole year to enable that patent, to generate more data to make it stronger. So I think knowing your own limitations and working and being happy to work with people with diverse backgrounds is how it's going to work out the best. Yep.
I know you didn't mention it in the talk as your compound was sold off earlier, but do you think the limitations around access to novel device medications through our current health system may also going forward be quite a strain on the translation system, that being the PBS and the ability to get something listed?
If you make a really good, cost-benefit analysis for the government, they will put it on the PBS. So you have to do pharmacoeconomic argument. So you can't just say it's the best thing since sliced bread. You actually have to give hard facts, a pharmacoeconomic analysis of how these people who have intractable pain, which not only affects them but their caregivers as well, who can't work because they've got to look after them. So the pharmacoeconomic argument will get it across the PBS, onto the PBS. If you put it in without a pharmacoeconomic argument, it probably won't get on the PBS. You do pharmacoeconomics here, don't you?
Well, we have a centre that actually helps with a lot of health economic
Yeah.
Evidence-based sort of assessment of those sorts of things. So I think we can do a lot more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's the word that people tend to use though.
Yeah. There aren't that many pharmacoeconomic experts in Australia, so if you want to get into a field where you'll have many choices of jobs, that's one of the fields, pharmacoeconomics.
Okay, I think we've exhausted all the questions. I think could everybody just show their appreciation? That was a fantastic talk and a great overview. We also have a few drinks outside, so if anybody wants to stay and socialise and have a chat to Maria, other people, you're most welcome.